Hey, my friend. Hello, my neighbor. And welcome to the Paul Leslie Hour. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, today we've got one of the greats in the record business, Mr. Harold Shedd. Harold's a music industry executive and one of the top record producers of our time. Mr. Shedd's here for an exclusive interview with Paul Leslie. Hey, before we start, real quick, the Paul Leslie Hour, I'm reminding you, is made possible by listeners like you. And no amount is too small or too large. Just go to thepaulleslie.com/support. Your contribution keeps the show going and allows for more exclusive content like this. And here we've got a good one. Mr. Harold Shedd on The Paul Leslie Hour. Gentlemen, take it away.
Hello, Mr. Shedd.
Yes.
Hey, this is Paul Leslie.
Hey, Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
I'm glad to hear it. Are we all set for our interview?
Okay. Yeah, I'm ready. Can you hear me all right?
Oh, yeah, it's coming through clear. Well, ladies and gentlemen, now we have someone with us who is every bit the legend in music. I want to introduce you to Harold Shedd, an inductee in the Georgia Music Hall of Fame. His early days began in the state of Georgia, playing in local bands, and he branched out into broadcasting. Harold Shedd was a radio DJ, engineer, sales manager, and then a station owner. And for those of you traveling through Bremen, Georgia, look out for that part of US 27 officially named Harold Shedd Highway. Harold Shedd moved on to Nashville at a certain point. He is responsible for producing the group Alabama, the first record of Shania Twain, to name a few more: Roger Miller, Mel Tillis, Glen Campbell, Willie Nelson, Reba McEntire, Katie Oslin, Toby Keith, a great variety. In fact, he is responsible for producing or collaborating on around 500 million records sold. Quite incredible. Well, Mr. Harold Shedd, it's a great honor to have you here for an interview.
Well, thank you, Paul. It's mighty fine to be with you.
Well, thank you on behalf of our listeners. I think most stories are best from the beginning. What was life like growing up in Georgia?
Oh, well, I love Georgia. I grew up on a farm, and I love that. You know, I lived on a farm until I was a teenager, and we were sharecroppers, so we moved around a good bit, but we always lived on a farm.
And what about the music that you heard growing up? Can you tell us about what you heard on radio or just around your community there?
Well, I didn't hear a lot of music. I became interested in music when I was 4 years old. I remember that. And my father made me, in the beginning, a makeshift kind of instrument to play, you know. It was at least close to a mandolin. I started out, I learned to play a mandolin later on. So I guess that was the reason for all of that. But then my sisters sang and my brothers all sang. And my father was a minister, and so we grew up in church singing, you know, so we sang most of our lives.
Well, on that note, do you have perhaps a favorite gospel tune or a favorite hymn?
Well, I have a lot of favorites. Everybody loves Amazing Grace and How Great Thou Art, and they are great songs, and there's so many of those. My mother loved everything that Jimmy Davis, the governor of Louisiana, that made gospel records. So I loved a lot of his records, especially the Supper Time cut on one of his albums.
Interesting stuff. Now, there's someone, I want to jump ahead a little bit because there was somebody I had a chance to interview who is from your part of Georgia. He was one of the most delightful interviews ever, and I'm talking about Rhubarb Jones.
Oh yes, Rhubarb was one of my really special friends. He was a great friend and a great friend to country music, or to all kinds of music, but especially country. Yeah, he was a great person, Rhubarb was.
And what a personality.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, he was, I think, disc jockey of the year 2 or 3 times, different times. So he was well respected and well revered in his industry. He was great at what he did.
So tell us, what was the inspiration behind you moving to Nashville? What was going through your mind at that time?
Well, at that time, I had spent a great deal of time in radio and was moving from radio into more jingles or, singing commercials. We're talking about early 70s now, and they were becoming, a lot more popular. And as it was, I had taken a job as a representative and sold jingles for a company out of Memphis that people in radio, I'm sure, would remember, because it was also a barter company. In other words, we would trade jingles for airtime. And the company was Pepper Tanner. I'm sure you remember it, Paul.
Pepper Tanner?
Yes, I worked for them in the jingle business as a sales representative for 2 or 3 years and moved to Nashville, and with 2 other people we started our own jingle company.
How has Nashville changed from the years when you moved up there to how it is now?
Oh my goodness, what has changed, Paul, that is. It may be what it's supposed to do. I'm not questioning that part of it, but the rest of it is really changed in that at one time, almost every house on Music Row, especially 16th and 17th Avenues, either had some form of recording or publishing or booking or management or had something to do with music. And it was all magical. You could go from house to house and you could write a song or publish a song or sing a song. It was just a magical place. And I went there in 72, and it was just one of the most incredible experiences, you've ever had if you love music. But all of that part of it is gone now. I'm sorry to say that. And they, the houses are gone even. It's condos and high rises and office buildings, and it's all very corporate now. So for me, I probably wouldn't fit in like I did when I was there at the right time for me,
Well, how did you learn to produce music?
Well, I was writing and producing jingles and commercials, and 3 of us that were working together built the studio, and so we did jingles for a while, and then the other 2 guys decided to go different directions. So about that time, I met Shep Willie. If you know who Shep Willie is?
No, I don't know that name.
Well, he was on Rawhide.
Ah, the TV show.
And he was on Rawhide and played Pete Nolan, the scout, with Clint Eastwood and Gil Favor. So anyway, he became my partner, and I started to focus more on music than commercials, and had met, some people, more people in the business, in the music business part of it, especially the promotion and marketing and distribution part of it. So that's how I met Alabama. This lady at Nationwide Sound, Betty Gibson, called me one day and said, I want you to listen to this band. We put out an independent record on them, and it might be what you're looking for. And so with that, the band turned out to be the group Alabama. So you know our history together. We had Group of the Decade, and Alabama's the most awarded group in any type of music. They were just an incredible band for the decade. So all of that kind of just happened. I don't know how that happened,
Well, I wanted to ask about meeting Alabama, meeting the members of that band. There's really no group out there like that. What did you think when you met the musicians?
Well, having been a musician and trying to be a musician, it was just something. I'd always had a band in my teenage years, and so I was not new to bands, but I never had a band that good, that could write and sing and play like Alabama. So I kind of felt like I was one of the bands, and the only difference was I didn't play music, but I made records out of their music, and it was just a great experience.
As I was mentioning at the introduction, so many great talent that you have been around, from Glen Campbell, Willie Nelson, Alabama, as we have been discussing. Could you say who the greatest raw talent you saw was?
The greatest raw talent?
Yeah, just pure talent.
Oh, I guess that would have to be Billy Ray Cyrus.
Yeah.
He was a talented young man. He made people throw their clothes up on stage. He did things I've never seen but one other time in my life, and that was in 1957 at the Fox Theater when Elvis performed. Ladies actually threw their underwear on stage, and it was the second time I'd ever seen that. So, this guy has something going on, So it was like that. I was impulsive a lot of times in my signings. I could, like when I signed the Kentucky Headhunters, I saw them at a showcase in Nashville. They were showcasing. They had recorded 8 songs on a cassette tape at that time. This is before CDs. And so I happened to be at this club the night they came in to showcase. One of my associates that worked at the record label was with me. And I says, hey, let's look at this band. He said, and this is kind of meant to be funny. And he says, why you want to do that? I said, because that's the ugliest band I've ever seen. So I want to see what they sound like. Long story short, we've had a lot of laughs about that since. But when they went through, they opened with the Only Daddy That'll Walk the Line, an old Waylon Jennings song. And they went into Walk Softly on This Heart of Mine, which was their first single after I had signed them. But I told my associate when they got to the chorus of Walk Softly, I just looked at it and I said, I'm going to sign this band to the record label. And it was like that. I knew immediately I was going to do something with that band. Same thing with Alabama. Alabama was performing for tips only in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and they were performing original songs, and people were just packing the place to hear them. So, if you're in the business, if people want to hear things they've never heard before, there are a lot of other people that want to hear that too. So it was just something I had to try and do, Did that make any sense to you, Paul?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, another thing that you hold a unique distinction. You produced the very first record of someone who would become a superstar. I'm talking about Shania Twain.
Yeah, Nora Wilson and myself, we did her first album because Nora had done the original demo tape for Shania when she came to town. And so I heard what he had done. In fact, we used, I think, 2 or 3 of his cuts, or the cuts they had done already on her first album. But we did her first album, and we had one pretty good record and 2 mediocre cuts on it. But then she met Mutt, and they fell in love and became soulmates and man and wife, and he just she blossomed then as a writer and artist once she met Mutt. So it was a great thing for her.
Did you know that she would become the star that she did? Did you have a hunch?
Well, in all honesty, I did, and I'll have to explain this to you if I can, Paul. I signed as many stars as I did singers, if that makes any sense to you. Because, there are thousands of singers in Nashville. I was one of them, so I know. And a lot of them sing really good. It's not that they don't sing good, but they're not stars. A star is a different thing, and that's something that I guess you feel as much as anything, because I felt like Shania, and I had another act like this I'll tell you about in a minute, but I felt Shania would be a star whatever she did. Was it singing, acting, commercials, television? I always thought she was a star regardless, and she is and was, and is still a star. She works a lot of big shows in Vegas now. But Toby was the same way. Toby, I thought, was a star. He wasn't the greatest singer in the world. Capitol Records told him he couldn't sing or write. So a lot of professional people didn't think Toby was a star. And I'm glad they didn't, because that gave me an opportunity, And I thought he was, and I signed him. Toby became and is a big star.
That's true.
But as you saw when he did commercials with Terry Bradshaw and for Ford, he could also be a star, and not sing anything. So it was a good step for him. K.T. Oslin was one of my favorite singers. The song 80s Ladies, I thought, was just one of the most incredible songs, and we made a really good, it was record of the year and album of the year, and she was female vocalist of the year, so it was a wonderful combination,
Would you say that you've had a favorite project?
Yeah. I guess your first project's always your favorite, but I had a lot of favorites. I had favorites right up through the end. Billy Ray was a Shania, Toby, KT, the Headhunters. They were all great projects. So I guess Alabama being the first project was the favorite, because it was like the launching pad, But I loved working with Glen Campbell and Roger Miller. They were both just super talents, you know, and they were stars. They were more than just singers.
You know, you were talking about Toby Keith earlier, and it does seem kind of, you know, you listen to a song like Should Have Been a Cowboy, and to me it's undeniable that it has that certain quality, and you produced that song.
Yes, that was the first record we did together.
It's endured.
It's, you know, you'll appreciate this, Paul. I went to a BMI dinner recently, and it's been played on the radio more than 7 million times.
Incredible.
Yeah. Back-to-back plays, it would be like 70-something years of music. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, mind-blowing.
Boy from the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma, you know.
How important is personal interactions, keeping good relationships when you're in the music business?
Oh, it's really always important to be able to communicate, you know. That probably was not one of my strong points, you know, but I did communicate enough to get the job done. A lot of people, I still talk to most of the people I've worked with that are still alive, and some of them I don't, but it's not for any particular reason. It's just you move on and do other things. We don't keep the same friends forever, I guess.
Well, you came highly recommended to me through the great Jerry Bradley.
Oh, my goodness.
I'm hoping you can tell us about him.
Jerry Bradley was really the man that got me started at RCA with Alabama. He was president of the label at the time, and he was one of the kindest, most professional men I ever knew. I still talk to Jerry on occasion. Saw him about a year ago when Connie died. I went to the service, but he's just a great man, and he ran a great company and had some really, really talented people that worked for him and that recorded for him. Jerry he's one of the people on Music Row in Nashville.
Well put. Well, please tell Sir Jerry Bradley I said hello.
I sure will. I talk to him occasionally. He's a great man. And so was his father.
What is the best thing about being Harold Shedd?
Well, I get to talk to people like you about music. I still love that. I'm really greatly flattered to be on your podcast today because I'm not a young guy anymore, and as we grow older, we don't get to talk about our favorite love, which is life and music. So, yeah, it's a whole different deal. Getting to meet talented people and work with them and trying to achieve their goal. I guess that's what I'm supposed to do, Paul.
Well, I can tell you that it shows that you were on the radio for quite some time because you have excellent pacing. You have just a really good rhythm when you talk.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I love radio, too. I did it for 14 years, and I loved every bit of it.
My last question, it's very open-ended. There's all types of people who listen in, all over the country, young, old, all different types of backgrounds. What would you say to anyone who's tuned in today?
Anyone that wants to do anything in particular, or just generally speaking?
Just generally speaking, anyone who's tuned in.
Generally speaking, well, I've always had a philosophy and it's worked for me. I love the music business more than anything I ever did in my life. So I did a lot of things to get there, and a lot of them were related. But as an example, from 72 until I retired in about 2010 officially, I felt like I never went to work a day. I went to a place I wanted to go and be every day. And that's what I would say to aspiring guys, especially in the music business. If you can't do one job, find another job that you can do, because there are a lot of rewarding things, in the entertainment business. And do something you love to do. Don't go to work and start complaining. Go to work and be happy. That would be all I could say.
Well, Mr. Shedd, thank you very much. A great honor to interview you.
Well, thank you, Paul. I appreciate our visit, and I wish you the best in 22 and on through the rest of our time.
Oh, thank you. God bless you.
God bless you, too. Thank you.
All right. Till next time.
Thank you for stopping by today. If you enjoyed our program, consider telling a friend about it. The Paul Leslie Hour is made possible through people just like you. So you want to keep the show going, right? Go to thepaulleslie.com. That's thepaulleslie.com. Click on Support the Show. And thanks to everyone who contributes. Performance of the intro music is courtesy of John Primorano, The Entertainer, written by Scott Joplin. End credit theme music is courtesy of John Primorano, the traditional song Corina Corina. Your announcer is Dan Gold. Hey, that's me. The show is hosted and produced by Paul Leslie. And we'll see you next time on the Paul Leslie Hour.